So the question is, so what I was going to ask is how you came up with Thorne as a character and what direction you wanted to take with him and his story. I'm trying to write my own story. I want to understand how to write such a lovable character. Okay, so this is one of my favorite subjects. Let's talk about characters. First of all, how do you build good characters? How do you choose an idea that is going to work? And then how do you build a character that people absolutely love? How did I come up with Thorne as a character, the protagonist of the Titan series and the Tower series? And then how did I write him into such a lovable character? The answer to that is both specific and general. The specific answer is that Thorne himself came around because I just had this really intense curiosity. I'd been reading some books and I had been doing research on something and came across this true or real life figure, Robert Wadlow, who was Guinness Book of World Records tallest man. So at 8'11", Robert Wadlow only lived to be about 21 or 22. But he was absolutely massive. And I saw a picture of him standing next to his dad. And his dad, who was 6 foot, looked to be half as tall. Looked to just be half his, half the height. And when I saw that, I thought to myself, wow, I wonder what he would do if he went into a video game, like a full immersion virtual reality video game. Where that thought came from, I have no idea. I think it was because at the time I was reading other VR books. And so I'd been thinking about like games where you take your own body into the game. And I started thinking about that. I started thinking, how would an algorithm even handle somebody who is that far outside of the norm? Somebody who was just completely, on the outer edge of what was even possible. And so I thought to myself, well, what if I had a character who was that big? The way a game handles physics is different from actual physics, right? And game design tells us that when somebody goes into a game, they're going to, a lot of the minor annoyances about life will be removed, right? Because it's not supposed to be exactly like real life, because that would suck, because real life sometimes sucks. Instead, it's like an optimized version of real life. The problem is that when you have somebody at that size, their mass increases exponentially as their surface area increases, right? So the bigger the person, like if you just take a regular person and you scale them up, they get absurdly strong and absurdly heavy and absurdly tough, right? And so as I started working through, just, idly working through the math on that, I thought to myself, wow, okay, here is an interesting character. Here is someone who, no matter what situation you throw him into, he is going to force the world to react in unexpected ways. And so that brings us to what I think one of the keys is for building really good characters. And that is people who force the world around them to change. They force everything around them to be different just by their very presence or their very being. They make the world react to them. They're not just reacting to the world, right? And the reason that's really important is because it automatically gives the character agency. Everything they do has impact. One of the real challenges with characters is that is finding ways to give them agency that doesn't feel contrived. And by creating a character who is so distinct or whose existence is impactful, you sort of get to shortcut that process. Now, let's talk about Lovable, though, because there's something really attractive about Thorne. There's something about Thorne who, this big giant guy who could just go around crushing people, but he doesn't. He could go around enforcing his will, but he doesn't. It would be easy for him to just sort of bully his way through and force everybody to do what he wants, but he doesn't, right? I gave him every conceivable advantage, right? He's smart. He is massive. He's fast and strong. His size does not impede him. It's a boon, right? He is unbelievably tough. His will is absolute. And he has all the resources anybody could ever want, right? He has all of these things. He is, in a sense, the perfect person. But rather than just say, okay, cool, he's got all the things, now let's just watch him win, instead, we add a bit of we add some naive characteristics, right? We add some flaws that are not actually flaws, and this is an important distinction, right? If Thorne was a serial liar, right? If he just lied a lot, and that was his flaw, nobody would like him. If he got really angry and just destroyed everything around him every once in a while, people wouldn't like him. If he was mean, people wouldn't like him. If he was manipulative, people wouldn't like him. Instead, we give him a flaw that is designed to highlight his goodness rather than his, what's bad about him. The intent is not to make Thorne perfect, but the intent is to make him aspirational. So there has been a trend in the last probably through the 80s and into the 90s to create, and even into the 2000s, to create characters who have these like intensely negative traits, who are anti-heroes, right? And the reason we created anti-heroes is because society was largely peaceful. I mean, obviously, early 80s, through the 90s, there was still a lot of chaos in the world. But people really felt like that was all going away. People felt like we had sort of arrived. And society was largely peaceful and prosperous. And at least, in the US, everything is booming, right? And as a result, people want complex characters who show human foibles. That's changing. In the last, since 2000, you might even say since 2001, the world has gotten a lot harder. It's gotten a lot rougher. There have been these sort of catastrophes, over and over and over again. And people's view of the world is not that it is this bright, positive, place where we're going to all thrive together. No, things have gotten a lot harder. Things seem to be more cutthroat. People seem to be engaging with the world in a more cynical way. And so the characters that they want are more aspirational. They're simpler, right? They are characters who we can look up to, who we can wish our life was like. People don't want catharsis as much anymore. People just want genuine goodness. And that is, I think, the key to Thorne's character. With all of the other stuff going on, Thorne is just genuinely kind. He's genuinely good. He always strives for the best, not just for himself, but for everybody around him. He's willing to sacrifice. He's willing to learn and improve, but it's for the sake of the people around him, not just so that he can amass, power for himself. And I think that is sort of the key, right? That's the key to his specific character. Now, not all characters can be like that, right? Thorne is a very specific character in a very specific story that is engineered to work in the way it does. But as you're thinking about your characters, I think one of the things that you can do to try and mirror some of this is pick traits that you really, really appreciate in other people. Pick traits that if you saw someone who embodied them, heart and soul, you'd say, I want to be like that person. Pick those traits and then give those traits to your main character. And as you do that, I think that you're going to find that the characters you come up with are really attractive. They're really lovable. So we did get another question here as part of this. Do you think the anti-heroes, do I think that anti-heroes come from the noir genre? So anti-heroes really emerged as a result, in my opinion, of the Roaring '20s. Again, a period post-World War I when everybody had decided that there were going to be no more wars, right? It was called the Great War because there were supposed to be no more wars afterward. And there was this huge boom and this huge time of prosperity. And as a result, when you read the pulp novels, all of a sudden the heroes are no longer like Tarzan, right? The heroes start to get more complex. They start to get gray morally. They start to take on some of these darker character traits. And it's because society at large was at peace and everything was booming. Technology was leaping forward and people had money and everything seemed to be going really, really well. And then you have the Depression, and then you have World War II. And all of a sudden, the characters change again. You start to get Superman, you start to get Captain America, you start to get these characters who are simple and are good, right? And evil and good are very well defined. And then as life continues and you start, and people come back from the Second World War and they once again settle into this time of prosperity, you start to get more complicated characters again. You start to get these anti-heroes and so I don't think that a specific genre created anti-heroes. I think that the genres are born out of the cycles of human desire that exist throughout society. So you might run across this phrase that we are in the fourth turning. There are these cycles of human psychology that happen, that you can map throughout history, that where society shifts from one major desire to another major desire. And we're in one of those shifts right now. And so we're going to be seeing more, simpler stories that allow people to escape, right? Stories that are sort of aspirational. This is one of the reasons things like One Punch Man have done so well. This is one of the reasons that OPMC has just made a huge comeback. This is a reason that Cozy has made a huge surge. People, grimdark epic fantasy is getting less popular, But epic fantasy is becoming more popular. Why? Because epic fantasy at its core is aspirational. You know, the farm boy picks up the magic sword and goes to slay the dragon. It's not complicated. Now, good epic fantasy obviously has a lot to it. But the core of the story is that simple hero's journey, right? And that's what people right now seem to be looking for. And I think that that's going to continue. Who knows? Maybe we'll hit another, period of time when life just seems good and people feel like everything is easy. And when that happens, we'll see this shift back into a desire for more complex, more nuanced stories, right? So these things roll in cycles. So anyway, that was a very long answer to your question. I hope that it did answer your question. Let me know if it didn't. But Connect, that's exactly right. That's 100% correct. So you hear anti-hero and you think of like Spawn, right? Like that is what I'm talking about. Everything looks good on the surface, like the 90s are prosperous. And so what do people want? They want stories about government agents being betrayed and making deals with devils and all of this stuff. And we're not in that place anymore, right? Now people look at the government and they're like, no, they're actually doing that kind of stuff. Maybe not the deals with devils, who knows? But they're doing that stuff. And so we want clean, stories that can take us away from what we believe reality is. Raymond Chandler said that people like noir characters because they could get the thrill of doing something bad, but still be reassured they were the good guys. And that's exactly it, right? When you have these very distinct categories of sort of bad and good, then people just want to be on the good guy side, right? And so you see that in the reflection of like societies around the world versus the Nazis. One side was very genuinely bad and one side was not. And so it became very easy to just be like, cool, if we want the experience of being a good guy who is unique and different, all we have to do is set him up against Nazis. He gets to punch him in the face. We're all good. But when you don't have that threat, when there isn't that bad guy for society to align against, then you start to go, oh, we've got to figure out other ways to get that same feeling of being the good guys, right? Of sacrifice, of all of these positive traits that we want to embody. Well, how do we do that? Well, why don't we take a morally gray situation, like present a morally gray situation, which is what noir is, and then we figure out through it who the good guy is and who the bad guy is, even though we might not know it, at the beginning. And so it's really just another way of doing the same thing or producing the same result, but for a different time. Connect says, the world sucks. We need optimism. Okay, wait, that's too much. Let's go back to some pessimism. That's pretty much how the cycle goes.